back to IT project management. In this module, we'll look at different methods of managing projects because there really is more than one way to reach your 5 C's. This module focuses on the primary job of a project manager, leading all the people who affect the project. As you've already seen, there are some leadership challenges that are unique to the project environment. So you'll want to start thinking about these early. You will also want to understand what the process is that people expect you to follow in order to build a mutual sense of direction in an environment with varying degrees of unpredictability. Project managers typically find themselves in 3 basic organizational structures. The functional organization, shown here as number 1 on the left, is on one end of the political spectrum. The projectized organization, shown as number 3 on the right here, is on the other end. In the functional organization, all the power rests with the managers who own the people in their departments, such as the IT manager, the operations manager, and the marketing manager. The project manager is typically in charge of smaller projects like changes to a company's intranet. They really have no hiring and firing or even decision power, and project management is just a little bit of administration among other daily work tasks. It is mostly limited to tracking planned schedules versus actual work completions and communicating about technical solutions and team workloads. In other words, the typical environment of a Scrum Master. Leadership for major projects is usually assigned to outside consultants. On the other end of the political spectrum stands the projectized organization. Here, the project manager has all the power, including hiring and firing team members and making serious financial decisions. This is typically the case for major technical projects with big budgets, such as implementing the IT infrastructure for a new airport or implementing a cloud architecture for a chain of hospitals. Often, the project or program manager in these contexts has Scrum Masters driving parts of the projects called work streams for them. In the middle, between functional and projectized, stands the most frequently used organizational structure, the matrix organization. In the matrix organization, basically every person has 2 bosses, a functional manager and the project manager. Both share in hiring and firing activities, and both make decisions together. In the weak matrix, here on the left, the project manager is often called a project expediter or project coordinator and can be found to help a Scrum Master with administrative tasks. It is very similar to the functional organization. In the strong matrix on the right, the project manager is part of a project management department, which also often encompasses a project management office, and whose job it is to empower project managers throughout entire organizations. The project manager here makes major staffing decisions, which they coordinate with the functional managers, and the project manager has full accountability for project schedule, budget, and quality. That is similarly the case in a balanced matrix in the middle here, only that the project manager is not part of a dedicated project management department, but instead housed in a functional department like the network group or the cybersecurity group. This can often feel like you're an island unto yourself, especially if there is no project management office or PMO available for support. But in many organizations, this is the most frequent way in which project managers fit into the organization. Here is a great overview of a project manager's role in any of the 3 organizational types, functional and projectized, and then the 3 flavors of matrix organization. Please pause the video for a moment and take a good look at this table. If you always have to seek approval for every big and small decision, how much authority do you really have? The answer is only as much as your communication skills, political experience, technical competence, and personal reputation will inspire in others. Remember, project managers don't manage projects, they manage people and their expectations. Of these people, most project teams need a leader who takes care of the administrative work, who protects their time and minimizes distractions, so that they can focus on building and creating new products and solutions. The project manager's job is to show the direction into which a project will go, to ensure that the team has everything they need, and to know when to get out of the way. This makes the project manager a servant leader. The second group is executive level stakeholders like vice presidents, CEOs, CFOs, or directors. Managing their expectations is also often referred to as managing up. Here, your job is to know all the information about the project, identify the most important data points, and translate them into easily understandable graphics and reports, to communicate any risks, and to keep the project in line with company strategy. If you think like an executive and learn to communicate efficiently and effectively, you will quickly earn trust in your competence and professional personality. Executives also expect you to quickly pivot to new situations and to take your team with you. Trust is also a major factor for the third big stakeholder group, your customers or clients. They often make efforts inside of their companies dependent on the dates and the budget costs that you promised them. So be sure that you say what you do and then absolutely do what you say. That's the reliability and integrity they need from you. They also often ask you to solve problems they are newly discovering, and it's upon you to guide and advise how to approach them. And to make sure that if any work outside of the existing contract is needed, that extra work is paid for. Lastly, there is an entire external community who depends on information from your project as well. Depending on the industry, they can be government officials, the general public, business partners, and so on. Don't underestimate their communication needs. Doing so is a surefire way of losing your credibility. So, leading is more than telling people what to do. You build the authority by building relationships. And these relationships are based on your project success factors. You may remember them: collaboration, cooperation, coordination, and critical thinking. After all, you are leading an effort to create value for all of your stakeholders. Building personal authority, as we have just seen, is the mark of a strong leader, but that isn't enough. You will also need to build a network of formal authority, that is, the authority represented by organizational structures and policies. Here are some guidelines for developing a network of formal authority. Make the project sponsor a partner with authority. A sponsor is a person with more formal authority than the project manager who is accountable for project success. Establish a pattern of regular communication and reinforce the alignment of project goals with the sponsor's goals. Involve the decision makers early. Authority for project decisions comes from many places and departments, so that people you'll collaborate with know early on when you need them to step up and step in. Each group has authority for different decisions. Build a network of authority by knowing who to involve early and why. Developing a reputation for transparency and competence will go a long way toward building these networks of authority. And lastly, likability in a political environment always helps. But remember that the effective use of the science of project management is always the best way to win the confidence of all stakeholders. So let's say that you have been entrusted with managing a project and your sponsor or your project management office gives you a list with names of all the people who are assigned to your team. What now? Project teams make decisions day after day, often based on incomplete information. How they do this and how they eventually bounce back from failure is up to what you as the leader model and the team culture you establish. You'll want a team that can actively disagree, learn from each other, develop a solution together, and maintain positive, respectful relationships even when the going gets tough. This is where team values should translate into visible behaviors. For example, if valuing divergent views is a team value, then active listening will be a team behavior. If optimal performance is a value, honestly giving and receiving feedback is a team behavior. Project leaders set the tone and form the culture on their teams. But before that culture solidifies, teams usually go through 5 stages: forming, storming, norming, performing, and after all the work is done, adjourning. Teams progress through these stages and at times move backwards into previous stages, for example, if new members join and so on. Throughout all of these stages, though, the team leader adjusts their style to address the needs of the group. Pause this video and take a look at the descriptions. Remember that the project team is the engine of productivity. Like attention to your car's health, proactive care, and regular maintenance will extend the life of the team and reduce breakdowns. You'll want a solid team and great stakeholder relationships so that you can more easily manage uncertainty on your project and receive the executive support that you need. In this section, I'll delve a little bit into the process part of this module to give you a quick overview of what a project lifecycle typically looks like. Whenever you're on the hook to lead a team and deliver something new and unique, chances are that you'll feel overwhelmed by the huge list of things that need to be accomplished. You might even panic at first. You know what helps here? Coming back to the classic definition of what a project is, namely, a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Let's unpack that a little. You're creating a unique product, service, or result, right? Given that it's unique, you'll want to ask your stakeholders what their idea is of that end product, who's going to use it and how and when, and what they want the result to do for them. We call those statements requirements, and we collect them in a file or a database and store them centrally. Sometimes your stakeholders know exactly what they want. Maybe it's a new release for your current software product with a few new buttons and some color changes for specific functionality, but nothing earth-shattering. The kind of project that you and your colleagues have done before, a lot. Maybe some of the code is even already done and just waiting to be combined with other code and released. This is where you look at the requirements, analyze what needs to be built first and last, get the design on paper, build the modules, test them, and release them so that operations can maintain them. This is the easiest way to get small projects done when your stakeholders know exactly what they want and when your team knows exactly what to do to get from start to finish. And because your engineers have done this kind of work before, it's easy to predict how long the cycle will take, how many hours people will be working, and therefore how much it'll cost. We call this simple process the Software Development Lifecycle, or SDLC. In the easiest projects, this SDLC will happen only once, and your successful project is done. But what if your stakeholders can't agree on their final idea of what your piece of software should do? Or maybe your project is so experimental that nobody knows whether what some marketing person promised the CEO is actually doable. And on top of that, the CEO is so in love with the product idea that they're ready to invest $1 million and want you to complete the entire project in 2 months. Would one SDLC be the best way to guarantee a successful outcome? Hardly. With so much uncertainty and so much money riding on the success, you'll want to take a different approach. In a case like that, with a lot of uncertainty and experimentation, it's often better to approach the project piecemeal. Instead of building the one big solution at the end of the development lifecycle, how about splitting the big requirements list into smaller chunks that we can be more certain will lead to a usable result? One that the stakeholders can agree is what they are looking for and make changes along the way. That usable result is often called a minimum viable product, or MVP. and all of the MVPs taken together at the end are more likely to result in a successful, flexible project outcome than that one single development life cycle. Of course, you've already realized that you cannot get from any requirements to even a minimum viable product without actually designing, building, and testing something, right? Now, with all the uncertainty we have here, especially around our requirements, we want to be sure that our stakeholders can confirm that we're building what they're looking for. So before any product is released, we make sure that there is a review and approval step. At that step, we are demoing the product to our stakeholders, make sure we catch any misunderstandings and mistakes, and since we have built out just a small subset of the requirements, fixing our MVP should be relatively quick and easy. Now, if our demo goes well and our stakeholders approve our MVP for release, then we can, well, release our MVP and move on to the next chunk of requirements that we're going to develop. We can now repeat these short SDLCs until all of the requirements are built, or until all of the budget is spent, or until we're out of time. And who decides when we stop? Our stakeholders, of course. You've probably heard that structure and routine makes people feel comfortable, and it does. Knowing what's next helps people feel more secure about the future. The first structure for our software development lifecycle that we have discussed is often referred to as predictive, meaning that our projects are small enough and we know exactly what we're going to build and how, so that we can easily predict a good outcome. This is commonly referred to as waterfall. When the uncertainty and frankly the budgets get bigger, so does the risk of failing. And we want to break the requirements up into smaller chunks and build, test, and release each of these chunks as a minimum viable product. We repeat this design, build, test, and release cycle until either all the requirements are built or we run out of time and money. This structure is often called iterative. You may also know it under its industry buzzword, agile. No matter what SDLC structure you choose, you should choose one of these because there is a lot of supporting material out there to help you manage your development cycle well and not fall into chaos. Time to look at the big picture now. Let's see if we can understand how you can mitigate uncertainty by clearly accounting for all the little deliverables and tasks that are part of not just the software development lifecycle, the SDLC, but the overall project management lifecycle. So yes, your software development lifecycle or SDLC builds the thing, the unique product or service which is described in the requirements. That's what we call the product scope, but that's not enough. On the outside of the SDLC, there are more steps to take to make sure your project has structure and accountability. For example, think about how this project becomes an actual project with you as the project manager, with a more or less defined scope and with an estimated starting budget and perhaps already a team list. All of these questions are addressed and documented in the project initiation or definition phase. Once you have a pretty good idea what the project is about, you'll need to organize its structure. That happens in the planning phase and includes collecting all the requirements, negotiating with your stakeholders how to break the work up into logical sequences, building a schedule, assigning people to the work, and making a spending plan. This is also where you estimate and communicate how much your project is likely to cost and what the structure and timeline is going to be. These two steps set the framework for the execution phase. This is where our software development lifecycle or SDLC lives, but there are many other work items outside of the engineering portion that need to be completed too, such as user training, online knowledge base or help manual entries, marketing materials, test and quality plans and checklists, progress reports and charts, and more. During the execution phase is also where the speed at which a project progresses and the money it uses up is measured. and where corrective actions are developed to address risks. That group of tasks is what we call the monitoring and controlling phase. The metrics from the monitoring and controlling phase are important performance feedback and can trigger replanning or other corrective actions that occur in the 3 phases at the top of the yellow box here. The closing phase finally exists to archive all the documentation, capture lessons learned, pay all the invoices to any consultants you have hired, and return internal staff to the reassignment pool. It's basically your cleanup activities. As you can tell, there's a whole lot more that goes into making a project successful than just building the unique product or service in the gray box. There are many other deliverables that help keep the project on track and profitable, and everything together, that is the gray box and the yellow box around it, is the project scope. Project scope is always bigger than product scope. In fact, your project management work is part of the project scope. So yeah, that was a hard one, wasn't it? Let's look at this another way. Here's a great overview of the 5 phases, and here we see that they don't always have to occur in a serial fashion. While the initiation phase and the closing phase remain the 2 bookends of the process, the middle 3 phases are based on feedback cycles and can repeat. The most important thing to remember, though, is that no matter what the iterative structure looks like, the 10 knowledge areas that you see on the right here still need to be applied consistently throughout all the phases with the help of various tools listed in the Project Tools box on the lower right. And now you really know what this course is all about. In this module, you learned more about the connection between organizational structure and project manager authority and how to address this as one of the leadership challenges in your day-to-day project manager activities. You also learned that structure makes stakeholders feel safe and confident in a project's outcomes. But that structure really depends on the nature of the project. Lastly, we discussed the misperception that project scope is the same as the software delivery lifecycle, or SDLC, which is not true. Product scope, which is built in the SDLC, is always only a subset of project scope because the unique product or service is only one deliverable of many. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in another video.